We have with us a special guest joining us, Mr. Sanjeev Sanyal, the economic advisor to the Prime Minister, joining us on the show from the sidelines of the India Global Forum 2024. Hi, Mr. Sanyal. Thanks so much for making time and speaking with us today. I just wanted to begin by asking you, since you're joining us from the sidelines of the IGF and you've been attending such conferences for many years now, how's the perception of India changed from now, let's say, versus 10 years ago?
I think there's a huge change. I mean, there's no comparison because, frankly, what's happened is that earlier India was seen as, a peripheral, emerging market where, we could patronizingly talk about India's development and so on, poverty removal and so on. Whereas now, India is seen as integral to the world economy. We are seen as an emerging global power, which is already the world's fifth largest economy, but within about 24 odd months, we will also be the world's third largest economy. And we are contributing a significant proportion now of world growth. So we are not somebody who, the charity case that everybody has to sort of tag along, but we are the driving force of world economy. I think that change in our place in the world is very evident.
Yeah, we are not surely the charity case, and one would argue that we never were. But talking about the growth, we have been growing at 7 to 8% for the last few years now. But many say that we don't have the right ingredients as yet with respect to, let's say, infrastructure, electricity, etc., to grow at this pace on a sustainable basis. What's your answer to that?
See, sustaining high periods of growth is something that has to be earned. There's nothing predetermined about it. It's a question of how much effort are we putting into sustaining it. And just look around you. I mean, look at the huge amount of highways we are building, the upgrades of the airports, the railways, the ports, and yes, even of our power production capabilities. I mean, we are obviously, we are still building conventional power plants, but we are also building nuclear power plants and, of course, massive investments going into green hydrogen and other things. So, it's a multi-year effort that has to be sustained. And at every stage, you have to keep building on it. So we understand the difficulty of it, but we are doing it. And even if we slip up here and there, the sheer effort being put in will, keep going on.
Okay, the effort is still on and you're clearly taking the feedback as well. But to that extent, how is Modi 3.0 going to be different than 2.0, especially in the context that BJP did return to power, but that happened only with a coalition. So how's this entire, 3.0 is going to be different than 2.0 in your mind?
There'll be absolute policy continuity. You can see that in the choice of the cabinet ministers and various other things. I think the fact that Prime Minister Modi is back for the third term is an endorsement of anything of the policies he's done over the last decade. So what are the bricks on which this is built? First of all, sustain high level growth. We are unapologetic supply siders. We build infrastructure. We believe in making making it easier for business to innovate and to expand their businesses. Wherever we have slipped up, tell us, we will make changes. So we are very much into investing and building up the productive capability of our country. Second, we believe in macroeconomic stability. You've seen that over the last decade. Inflation has been kept well reined in the 2 to 6% range. Our foreign exchange reserves are now more than our external debt. So in fact, we are a small net lender to the world. We can see that in terms of the way the banks were cleaned up. So from macro stability perspective, also, we are no nonsense. And finally, we believe in directly dealing with absolute poverty. So rather than get involved in corrosive debates about inequality, which is jamming up policies in the West, we are directly dealing with absolute poverty, whether it's in terms of using direct benefit transfers, building houses under Prime Minister's Awas Yojana, or whether it is Nal Se Jal, and so on. So direct interventions that help the poor. So the combination of these three things, these principles remain the same. Now, obviously, specific policies will evolve as time passes, our resources change, and so on and so forth. But of course, as our tax to GDP ratio is clearly now rising, the resources available to us is also growing. And Indian companies, Indian banks, and so on are a different scale of capability than they were just 5, 6 years ago. Even as recently as the pre-COVID period, our banks and our corporates and our infrastructure capabilities were much lower than what they are today. So, we will keep pushing on along this path.
You will keep pushing along this path, but the feedback from the general elections and the fact that it wasn't really that char so par, the kind of slogan that BJP had come out with, it didn't really achieve that. Are you hearing this in the context of the rural distress which is there, the unemployment which is there? How are you going to take it forward from here on then?
So most important thing about job creation is to push on with growth. There is no such thing in the medium to long term as jobless growth. And there is no such thing as job growth without actual economic growth. So we have to push along this path. It is creating jobs. But as I keep pointing out to people, there are no such things as poor people. They are poor places. What I mean by that, if you happen to have two brothers, let's say they grow up in Muradabad. One of them stays back in Muradabad and another happens to go off to, let's say, Dubai. After 5 years, one person will be earning a lot more than the other. Why does this happen? It's because places matter, you see? So what we need to do is to get the eastern half of India to get on and grow again. And this is an absolutely important thing because this is going to be the engine of growth going forward, whether in terms of industrial growth and other things. And so the eastern half of India, this is, I think, the real gap in India is not north-south as is made up to be by some people. It's east-west. And so investing in heavy infrastructure east and getting eastern India to sort of begin to be a part of the growth story is important. Now, obviously, we are seeing huge infrastructure being built out in the northeast. There are states like Odisha where infrastructure has got built much, much faster. But there are states like West Bengal and others where really we need to see that like big build out happen. Then you see then the whole engine will begin to grow in a different way.
Okay, but talking about the different way, what's your view on privatization? Let's say the banking system, OMCs, etc. Do you think privatization is the way to go, or over the last 5 to 7 years, public sector entities have proven that they can do work very efficiently?
So let me say that as a general principle, I am in favor of privatization. And you've seen that where the Air India and several others, we have listed LIC as well. So, a general preference for privatization is there. This is not to suggest that the public sector has no role at all. And there is, even if you want to privatize, there is very often a case of sort of cleaning the public sector up and building them up so that we can get a good price for it. So in both cases, I think investing somewhat in the public sector is important. And of course, there are areas where we want to retain a certain amount of public sector presence. For example, in banking, we have been clear that while we want more private banks, we want them to expand quickly, there is a role for public sector banks as well. And we intend to retain about 4 big public sector banks going into the future as well. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't want the private sector. We want the private sector to grow. In fact, we want it to grow faster than the public sector so that over time, more and more of the banking sector is run by private agents. We also would like, there are some public sector banks that we may want to privatize as well at some point. So, retaining certain amount of mix in certain sectors like banking, defense, etc., which we consider strategic sectors. We have said it repeatedly before. I'm not letting into some new state secret or something like that. This is our way. Now, in general, we prefer the private sector to be at the cutting edge of innovation and so on. And there are areas where, like in space, where historically it was entirely public sector. ISRO has done a great job. So obviously you don't want, we still need ISRO, but there are areas where now ISRO is becoming an enabler for allowing private sector to come in. We have done the same thing, for example, in payments. NCPI runs UPI. The existence of UPI has allowed many private sector companies to build on it. So there's the India stack. So there are areas where the public sector provides public goods or provides leadership or there is some benefit of retaining a level of mixed presence where the public sector will be retained. But I keep telling you that in general, we prefer the private sector to be the driving force of the economy and provide the innovation, entrepreneurship, etc. And with the public sector and the government playing the leading role in things which can be called public goods.
Sure. Mr. Sanyal, I just wanted to shift the focus away, and I wanted to check, would you care to comment on the opposition allegations of the stock market manipulation per se on July 3rd and 4th? Any comment?
Well, I am not the one to respond to political allegations. If they have some proof on this, they should present it to SEBI, and I'm sure they'll examine it.
I appreciate that, but I also wanted a sense from you with respect to the view on the global rating agencies and the sovereign rating of India. You have India's GDP, which has been above 7%, one of the fastest growing economies for many quarters now. The current account deficit, as I pointed out, just turned surplus. How should one deal with these global rating agencies? In the sense, should one ignore them completely and put their head down and continue working? Or what kind of position does government have with respect to that?
No, I think we can't pay attention to things like sovereign ratings. They are things that do have real world implications for the way our cost of capital, etc., comes out. So we can't ignore many of these global ratings. Now, I have argued this before, that while many of these rating agencies have upgraded our outlook and so on, they are well behind the curve. My own calculation suggests that on any objective criteria, India should be at least two levels above where it is on sovereign upgrades. So not just one, but two levels up from where we are currently rated. But sovereign rating agencies have been very conservative, and they have been well behind the curve for some time. But eventually, I think reality will catch up with them.
Okay, yes, they've been behind the curve and hopefully they'll catch up soon. But just before I let you go, if I had to put you on a spot and ask you to choose one, the next 5 years would belong to manufacturing or services, would you be able to give me a pointed answer?
I think we need to push on both fronts. So in case this is derived from some of the views like Raghu and others have been arguing that we should sort of entirely tilt towards services, I'm sorry, I don't agree with that on multiple reasons. First of all, we're a large economy. We can more than sustain expansion in both services and manufacturing. And what is all this large infrastructure that we are building out? This is all beneficial to manufacturing. Why shouldn't we take advantage of it? When you're talking of China plus one, a lot of those supply chains coming out, we have got to take advantage. Where is it? It's in manufacturing. And there is no reason we can't compete at it. There are many manufacturing areas where we are world class. I mean, take, for example, pharmaceuticals. We are, the world's pharmacy. And now we are proving to you in electronics that we can be a serious player in electronics. We have just in the last 4 years gone from being a non-player to becoming the world's second largest manufacturer of mobile smartphones. So, we can compete and we will compete. That doesn't mean every single effort will succeed, but I totally disagree with those who say that India should somehow abandon manufacturing and just go for services. So the fact is, we will do well in services, but there are many people who can't write code or do artificial intelligence and other things. We have to deploy them in other activities, and many of those things may be simple things like tightening screws and loading goods and things like that, and that is fine. That's how every society has to create a ladder where the first step has got to be somewhere in manufacturing or construction and things like that.
Okay, on that constructive note, I'll let you go. That's Mr. Sanjeev Sanyal, the member of the Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister.
If you like this video, then like, share and subscribe to ET Now.